Welcome to The Real Math of Business with Alena Bennett, where you plus this podcast equals better decisions. I'm Alena Bennett, speaker, author, and leadership expert. I work with chief executive officers and chief financial officers really to help them create universally investable companies where people serve people and the math just works. This week, I'm chatting to the incredible Cooper Chapman. But first, here is my thought-provoking question. So we've obviously all just come out the other side of the holiday season where many of us celebrate Christmas and many of us have received and gifted lots and lots of presents. Now, I'm not sure about you, but sometimes I will open a present and I will receive a gift and I will look at it and I will feel like this is absolutely not necessary. I might sometimes think, gosh, you sort of should have just, given me the money that you paid for instead of this, or which is a little bit shallow, but at the same time, I'm thinking, I really don't like this or need this or will use this. And I hate wastage. So then typically what happens is after I've had that very cheeky thought about you should have just given me the money, I think, who can I re-gift this to next? Because I don't, in the spirit of not wanting to waste it, right? I will also quite often think, gosh, there is no way you needed to give me anything for Christmas this year. Like I just don't need anything. I'm kind of that age where it's actually more fun to give gifts than receive gifts. I go and buy the things that I want, and I don't actually want or need for that much, to be perfectly honest with you. And so I truly received some gifts, and before I've even opened them, think, why? You didn't need to do this. And I wonder if you're the same. I wonder if you feel like, you received gifts you didn't need to. I wonder if you got caught up in that crazy ridiculousness at the shops a few weeks, in the weeks leading up to Christmas where everyone was just buying stuff. Well, why? I understand it's a season of giving and that's lovely. But truly, what is the purpose of giving a gift? I'm not saying gifts are bad. I am just saying that everybody receives gifts differently, and sometimes gifts are not always what you need to demonstrate love, appreciation, gratitude, or even to show off your generosity. So my thought-provoking question for you coming into 2026, so at the beginning of 2026, is how will you show gratitude and appreciation this year? Because it doesn't have to be a gift. It doesn't have to be money. In fact, when you look at all of, the love languages that, by the book by Gary Chapman, and then even the the 5 languages of workplace appreciation also by him as well, is, gifts, money really isn't everything. So all I want you to be thinking about or take away from this is to be intentional with how you will show gratitude and appreciation this year. Because showing gratitude and appreciation, absolutely critical, doesn't always need to be with money, gifts, and tangible stuff. And now to our chat with Cooper Chapman. Well, welcome to today's podcast. We are joined by the incredible Cooper Chapman, who we are going to learn over the next, 45 minutes to an hour how much more awesome he is, because I have not been given a bio. And so I am just going to throw it straight over to Cooper and say, Cooper, tell us what we need to know about you to have a really fun chat today. What I do know is the minute Jez, my amazing producer, said Cooper is a professional surfer that now runs an incredible purpose-led business, I said, well, you know what? Pretty much everyone who follows me know how long it took me to learn how to surf, and that was 2 years. So yes, please get him on, because if all else fails, I am going to learn to be a little bit of a better surfer today. Thank you so much for joining us. I know you are just off a plane from Brazil. So welcome. Tell us what we need to know today, Cooper.
Oh, thanks so much, Alena. It's nice to catch up and, kick off 2026 with my first time getting to jump on a podcast and, get to chat with you a little bit. And you're right. The little bit of info you got about me is right. I'm an ex-professional surfer. I traveled on the World Surf League Challenger Tour. I never quite made it to the top 30 in the world, but it was on that next sort of crop between sort of 50 and 100 in the world for pretty much a decade after finishing school, which, was a great way to learn a lot of really valuable lessons about myself, about the world, world about high performance. But I also learned a lot of skills around mental health because it was something that was a bit of a challenge in my family. I lost an uncle when I was quite young to mental illness and watched my dad struggle quite a bit. So through that journey, I was always really forward thinking and curious, working closely with psychologists on the things that I can do to, be more resilient. And then when my little sister lost a friend to mental illness in her last year of high school back in 2019, that was a big catalyst moment for me to go like, why are young people struggling so much with their mental health that, they're taking their own life and doing these unthinkable things? And I started to really reflect on the lessons that I had learned through my journey as a top level athlete and realized I never got taught any of this stuff at school. Maybe I can go and talk to some high school students and maybe my story might help them with some of these lessons and some of these different habits that I've intertwined into my life that have profoundly changed my life. And yeah, that was where my business, The Good Human Factory, was started. I was also very aware that as an athlete, you need a bit of a transition. And I never
Yeah.
really felt like I was too attracted to any job specifically for after surfing. I thought maybe, coaching or something. But I also loved connecting with people and teaching people things that I've learned and, trying to help people. So when I started the Good Human Factory and started to deliver, keynotes and workshops with high school students, I realized I had quite a bit of a knack for it. And then, the business has kind of exploded over the last 5 years into a whole range of different things. It started with workshops. I now host my own podcast, Good Humans with Cooper Chapman, which has now hit over 1 million downloads, which is really cool, interviewing experts in a whole range of fields and trying to learn the things that we can do to unlock our full potential. I
Right.
just wrote my own book as well, The 1% Good Club, which came out in October last year, which is really cool to see it at all the airports. And, we've sold a couple thousand copies already, which is really exciting to start to see the feedback that my story and the book that I wrote is helping a lot of people. So, yeah, between the keynote speaking, being an author, podcast host, that's a bit of sort of where I've come from, where I am now, and lots of other exciting stuff coming up that I'm sure we'll talk about today.
Wow. Well, I'm so pleased that you did your intro, not me, because from the horse's mouth always sounds better. And I mean, I was just saying congratulations in my head every time you said something. So I would just say congratulations on an incredible career to date. And also on your, the 1% Good Club looks incredible. If when you said the Good Human Factory, I mean, when I heard that, I thought, gosh, there are so many times where I will be having a conversation, whether personally or professionally, and we'll be, kind of complaining about something or someone, and we'll just go, mate, we just want them to be a good human. Like that really should just be our goals. Quite often I talk about that with my friends in a parenting context. When things get really hard with our children, we'll be like, you know what, when push comes to shove, we don't care about the marks they get. We don't care about, if they're going to be top athletes. We just want them to be a good human. I mean, that was what came to mind when you said that. Where did you come up with the Good Human Factory as a business name?
So I actually didn't come up with the name, funnily enough. So the story goes like this. When my little sister, told me and my family around the dinner table that she'd lost a friend to suicide,
No.
I remember just being like super frustrated and upset. And I'd just come from an overseas trip to America, surfing Kelly Slater's wave pool, living this extraordinary life.
Yeah.
And then I come home to see my sister upset like this. And I was just like, I wonder if there's anything I can do about it. And I'd run some camps with young surfers on how to become better surfers. But part of that, I'd do a mindfulness visualization exercise. And all the parents after said they really loved that. And I was like, that's weird. Like, that's the thing that I kind of pushed back against quite a bit when I was a young surfer.
Yeah.
And then when my sister lost that friend to suicide, my dad at that dinner table was like, why don't you try and speak to one of your old school teacher friends? I had a close friend of mine. His name's Woody. He's a teacher at my old high school, Narrabeen Sports High. And he's like, why don't you call Woody and see if maybe you can go and speak to some of the students? I know the kids at your surf camp really love the meditation. Maybe that'll help some kids at schools with their mental health. So
Yeah.
I was like, oh, yeah, good idea. So I called Woody and I went down to the Collaroy, if anyone knows the Northern Beaches, and we went and had a beer. He was an old teacher friend. I hadn't really seen him in like 4 or 5 years. He actually, when he got married, he was in Hawaii for his honeymoon, and I was there for one of my surf comps. So his wife and him came and met me in Hawaii like 4 years after I finished school. So we got to catch up. So it was nice to connect a little bit after school. So after I called him, I was like, did you hear about the suicide at the school around the corner? And he was like, yeah, man, so tragic. Like my sisters went to a different school to me, and he's like, so
Mm.
sad. And I was like, I've got this idea about, talking to the kids about, mental health, but maybe in a way that, normally isn't talked about at school. I don't want to talk about mental illness and make it heavy. I want to talk about like gratitude, kindness, mindfulness, all these lessons that I've been learning with some, really high level psychologists in my surfing. And maybe it'll help some of the kids. So we caught up for a beer the next day and we workshopped a bit through it. And he was very entrepreneurial. And he said to me,
Yeah.
you do also realize that public speaking is a very lucrative career if you're good at it and you're not fearful of it. There's the public speaking world's actually quite lucrative. And I was like, I had no idea. I'll put that at the back of my mind for if I do pursue this further. But he basically, I was like, these are the things that I want to talk about: gratitude, kindness, mindfulness. And he's like, you're such a good human for wanting to do that. Like, you should call it the Good Human Factory. The kids come to your workshop and they leave a little bit better of a human. It's a good human
Yeah.
factory. And I was like, okay, and the name stuck, and my name obviously being Cooper, I've got double O in it. So
Yeah.
very often I'd sign my signature Cooper with a smiley under the OO. And I was like,
Mm-mm.
oh, I could do a smiley under the good. And that's where
Yeah.
my logo, the good,
Yeah.
came from, was because I'd always written OO Cooper. And I was like, oh, good
Ah,
human factor. So that's where my smiley good logo came from. And yeah,
yes.
the name just stuck. So that's where the name came from. And kind of really rounding back to what you started with, it kind of coincided with this sort of inner voice that I've always had, which I call my inner good human, which I definitely didn't listen to a lot of the time. And I still try my best to, listen to it as much as possible. But
Mm.
that was kind of a really sort of abstract symbol of what the good human factor is, that inner good human that I feel like we all have. And it's just, how do we listen to it more? How do we lean into it more? And that's, yeah, what the good human factor is about. How do we, gather the knowledge from good humans, learn from them, and then try and sprinkle it into our life?
And I think something that you said, which was, you know, you're talking about this stuff now that no one really spoke with you about in your professional surfing career. And this is the thing, now that concepts like gratitude, mindfulness, meditation, are now on the radar for everyone, which is wonderful. Like, we didn't get taught that. No one said this is important. In fact, if anyone did, you'd kind of roll your eyes and go, next,
Yeah.
And so it is so wonderful that I think one of the things about the younger generation is that they are open to having these conversations. They are open to talking about it. But it's wonderful that you've stepped in to kind of provide to facilitate those conversations, because we don't often have the language to deal with it all. Is that right?
Yeah, and just trying to like make it cool. Like the thing that, quite often when we look at mental health, we look at it through the lens of mental illness, which is extremely important, especially for those who do, have a diagnosed mental illness, with those who are in crisis and need to, know where the resources are, like calling Lifeline on 13, 11, 14, having the knowledge that we can go on a mental health plan. This is all such vital information, but this is where majority of the mental health space has focused on for a long time. Whereas I feel like I'm coming from the other side of the spectrum. My goal is to get you from a 6 to an 8 out of 10, from a 7 to a 9 out of 10. And sure, if you are at a 1 or a 2 out of 10, the skills and the values and the habits that I talk about absolutely are going to help you move up what I call the treadmill of life. So I think there is so much space in this mental health world to have voices coming from, more of a positive psychology, more of an inspiration, motivation point of
Mm.
view. Like, I know when I was at school, when someone would come to talk about mental health, as you said, to kind of get that eye roll. Whereas I saw this kind of unique moment, but also opportunity and kind of almost guilt, and feel like I've been so lucky to learn this stuff. I'm a young pro surfer that I know when I was at school, like the pro surfers are kind of cool. Maybe if
Yeah.
I can come to these kids when normally
Mm.
they wouldn't want to listen to someone talk about mental health, but they go, oh, this guy's a pro surfer. Oh, his brother-in-law's Fisher. Oh, there's like these few little elements that I understand when I was a kid, I would have thought were kind of cool. And yeah, I found this little niche where I've been able to connect with students really well. But then the great thing about what I do is everybody has mental health. My workshop went from, all right, I'm going to have a student workshop and then an adult workshop. And all
Yeah.
the teachers started to say to me, wow, I really needed that. I knew a lot of the stuff, but the way that you did it, talked to me about it, really made it click for me and made me understand how I can add it into my life. So that's where I started to work in the corporate space. And,
Um,
now I do work with, I've done stuff with Telstra, Amazon, Westpac, Coles, Red Bull. Like, I'm working with all these mega companies plus small businesses to just try and help people understand themselves a little bit better, but understand those little things that we can do daily that are scientifically proven to make us feel good. So, yeah, I feel like the mental health space is evolving and it is becoming more talked about, but we
Mm.
need to move from knowledge to wisdom. How do we go from knowing about stuff to
Mm.
actually taking the action? And that's what I'm really trying to find, that sweet spot. And that's what a big focus of my work this year is going to be. How do we really step into that action? How do we actually develop those positive habits?
Yeah, wow. Maybe let's just come back to where this all, there are obviously a couple of pivotal moments in your career where you were directly impacted by the effects of mental illness, mental health. But, as you said, so many lessons learned being out on the tour as a professional surfer. Maybe if you can just paint that picture, tell us about those lessons that you learned as a professional surfer so we can kind of build into how does that shape and influence how you talk about mental health today?
Absolutely. I think that the biggest core theme that I probably took out of that period of my life, that chapter of my life, is do not base your self worth and your identity on your career achievements and external validation, because that was something that drove me so much and I didn't realize
Right.
how unhealthy it was. For so long, I was driven by if I did well in my surf comps, I felt at the top of the roller coaster. You know, everyone's patting you on the back, wants to be
Yeah.
around you, everyone's on the phone to you, like, oh, well done, mate. And then you do poorly and poof, ghost town. No one wanted to talk to you. And I felt so long my self worth was tied up in that. And I felt like I rode this roller coaster of mental health. And I feel like so many of us do, whether you're
Mm,
an elite athlete or whether you're somebody just trying to get a promotion at work, or you're somebody who just wants to get recognition from somebody at work for the work that you've been really doing.
yeah.
For so long, that was what I based my self-worth on. For so long, that external validation was what I craved. And I didn't realize it was an unhealthy tap to be drinking from. And for, probably up until about 21, my career was on a pretty forward trajectory going up and, I could ride that roller coaster. But then at about 22 years old, I lost my major sponsor. I lost $50,000 worth of funding towards my career with that sponsorship. And, my self-worth just fell off a cliff. And, I fell into a pretty dark place. I felt like, I didn't want to go to the beach. I had to peel all the stickers off my surfboards. Like I was about to
Wow.
retire at about 22 years old. And
Yeah.
I mean, it's easy to look back now and kind of laugh at it and go like, why me? Like I was traveling the world surfing. My life was pretty good. But at the time when my self-worth was so wrapped up in that, I just felt so down in the dumps. And that
Mm,
was where these lessons really were learnt for me. I was very fortunate to be invited to the first ever Olympics training camp for surfing when the Australian Olympic Committee and the IOC come together and do a camp with the sort of hopefuls for the next 4-year cycle when Olympics introduced surfing for Tokyo. And it was about 2016, I think it was, or 2017. I was invited to this initial training camp. And
mm,
I knew I was probably about, I think 10 of us got invited. I reckon I was ninth or 10th ranked. So
yeah.
I knew I probably wasn't going to go to the Olympics. So I was like, what else can I learn from this camp? Because might not get these opportunities forever with surfing. It's probably like, my
Mm,
trajectory started going downhill. So I was like, what else can I learn? And one of the most valuable lessons I learned there was there was two people that really taught me these lessons. One was Surfing Australia's lead psychologist, Jason Patchell. I'd been working closely with him for years on how to get the most amount out of myself. But there was another guy that was there, Ben Crow, who's a mindset and performance coach. He's worked with Ash Barty, Steph Gilmore. He's incredible. And something he said really changed my life, really. He said, like, pro surfing's what you guys do, but it's not who you are. Like, who are you guys? And then we went on this real self discovery around trying to understand what your core values are and try and
mm,
base your self worth and your identity on your core values and how you live to them each day, because that's in your control. And that
mm,
sent me on this journey for the back end of my 20s to understand what my core values were. And what I really learned was core values are incredible to have, and they're almost like a compass, and they can point you in the direction of the life that you want to have. And what I discovered through these years of discovery and years of reading and researching and understanding all these books that I read about other people and like trying to find what values do I want to be mine. The five that I landed on that I feel like initially were fundamental for me for good mental health, but now I've just kind of agreed that everybody should have these five for good mental health,
yep.
are these five. And I'll explain why. The first one's responsibility. Like, we have to take responsibility. As soon as you start blaming other people and making excuses, the hill becomes a lot steeper when you're not willing to go, okay, what can I do to change my situation? So the first value is responsibility. We have to look, what can I do, not what can't I do? What,
Mhm.
is the solution, not what's a challenge? The second value is gratitude. I think every day we should all be practicing gratitude, looking for the positives rather than the negatives. We only have 6,000 thoughts running through our head a day. So many of us are not wasting them, but unconsciously moving them towards the negative. Like, you can train your brain to be more positive, but it comes with practice. So gratitude's the second one. The third one has been empathy for like the last year, but I think I'm about to change it to just connection as
Mhm.
a value. Our ability to connect and build, valuable relationships is so important. The fourth one's mindfulness, having a practice to be present with people, to actually be engaged with what's happening in life, not just, always thinking about the next thing or reflecting on the past. And
Mhm.
the fifth one's kindness, having, kindness for yourself, kindness for others, and kindness for the environment are so important. And I began to reflect on these values and realize if I'm ticking off a few things that align with these values each day, then I'm heading in that direction of my compass,
Mm.
of my values compass. So the extension, sorry, I'll finish with one last thing here, that because I've had the last month off really thinking about a lot of this stuff and where I want
Mhm.
to bring my messaging for next year. But the way I look at it is your values are your compass, they point you in the right direction, but your daily habits are how you walk in that direction. And
Ah,
each of those values can have a habit attached with it. Gratitude can have a practice, connection can have a practice, mindfulness can have a practice. So values are great to have. A lot of
yeah,
people say these are my values, but do your daily actions actually walk you in that direction? So yeah, a
absolutely.
big thing that I'm really trying to work on this year is like have your values as a foundation, have your habits that come around it, and then it becomes the nature of the person you are.
Yeah, absolutely. So I love those core values, and I can understand why you've adopted them, sort of as the values for everybody,
I call them
really.
5 fundamental values for good mental health. Like, if you're not taking responsibility, you're probably gonna have pretty poor mental health. We all know
Correct.
someone who's always looking for the excuse, always looking for, a blame. Generally, they have poor mental health. We all know someone who is always complaining about stuff and saying how bad their life is, usually pretty poor mental health. That's someone without gratitude. Someone who's isolated, poor mental health. If the
Mhm.
opposite of all these things is good mental health, Someone who's not present and always just got something going on and they're just fidgety, they don't look like they got good mental health. That's someone who's not mindful. Someone who's not kind, angry, being mean to people. Like, do you want to be around someone like that? Like, so once I like went, these are my 5 values, and the more I practice them, I'm like, I think these are just fundamental for everybody to have in some way, shape, or form in their life. These five.
And I think that makes so much sense. I want to come back to this idea that Ben Crow shared with you, which is pro surfing is what you do, not who you are. Like that could trigger an existential crisis. Like that who am I question. Like it's so frightening for lots of people to answer. And I understand the values were your way of kind of figuring out who we are. And, they're the things that you actually have control of because, I was sharing with you before, before we went live, how it took me 2 years to surf because you have no control over those waves. Right. And turns out I didn't have control over my body for a very long time. Anyway, that's beside the point. Um, I'm curious about the mental the mental quiver that you might have happened for you when that idea was presented to you, because I think that's the bit we need to overcome, right? Is we need to, in order to even say yes, actually values is what I need and a values compass would be helpful for me. There's this thing that goes on in your head and in your body where you're like, "Arr." What was that experience like for you?
Very slow and back and forth. And I'll be the first person to admit I'm not perfect with any of this stuff. Like, the reason why I talk about this stuff, the reason why I wrote a book about this stuff, the reason I interview people with this stuff is because I need it just as much as anyone else. And I'm so
Mm.
far from perfect with it. For me, it's all about consistency, coming back to the things that are important to you. And that's why I think those frameworks are really important. I have a framework of at least starting with 1% of your day for your mental health. But as you
Mm.
said, it's very hard to overcome those self-limiting beliefs, those things that are holding you back. So I just say start small. Start with 1%. Start doing one thing every day like the person that you want to be would do. Next day, do a little bit more. and then slowly over time it builds. But as I said, I'm, somebody who's far from perfect with all this stuff, but I just try my best to do a little bit each and every single day. But yeah, I do feel for people who are trapped in, those mindset loops that are just self fulfilling of, detrimental to,
Mm.
every part of their day. But doing those small things daily and really starting to try and witness them is so important. I think a good place to start for someone who does struggle with, that self talk is mindfulness and meditation, having a bit of time to just sit there and witness the thoughts, become the observer of what's going up in your mind. And
Yeah.
I think that's the first sort of step to improving your life and defining inner peace is to build the thing that is metacognition, building a space between you and your thoughts
Mm,
and going,
mm.
oh, I'm not my thoughts. Wait, it's just a constant stream that's running through my mind all day. In our waking day, we have around 6,000 thoughts running through our mind. Like, all right, how do I fill that quota up with more positive than negative? And then
Yeah.
your life's going to be better. It's like, it makes sense when you start to like break it down a bit more practically. And it's so hard to do. And it's way easier to do it in your mind, practically thinking, oh, this is what I'll do. And then,
Yeah.
you've still got to live through those 24 hours a day and not go back into that pattern. But yeah, for me, it's just about slowly building each day, starting with 1%, a few minutes of meditation, a few minutes of gratitude at night. Hey, and then in a week, it becomes easier. In a month, you start looking for the good things in your day each day because you've written down each night what you're grateful for, and it starts to become a bit more apparent in your life. Like
Mm.
nothing's going to happen overnight, but nothing's also going to happen if you don't do anything.
Do nothing. Yeah, that's it. So, because you now, through the Good Human Factory, work across, from children through to adults in corporates, I'd love to know, like, what do you notice as, yes, everybody needs good mental health, but there must be distinct characteristics that you observe with a sort of children based cohort versus a corporate based cohort. I'd love to know kind of those distinct differences. There probably is only a couple, between those when you're coming in, prior to them working with you.
I mean, the first is that we're all human. I initially thought there would be, I'd have to present very differently to youth compared to adults, but
Mm.
I learned very quickly that you kind of don't. And as well, like you don't really want to
Mm.
talk down or treat a 14-year-old different to an adult anyway. For me, it's just more so the imposter of going, into a mining site with a bunch of 60-year-old miners where you get the eye roll when you walk in. But normally
Yeah.
people leave and go, oh, this guy just genuinely cares about my mental health and he's sharing valuable information that he's learned from experts to help me. So you generally get people leaving with a bit of respect. It's probably harder with the students to get that because quite often students are in a bigger group and you have the
Yeah.
kind of like group mentality of like, oh, is everyone listening or am I going to listen? So that's like a big one. Obviously, students, yeah, are a little bit more distracted because I'll speak to quite large groups. Sometimes I'll have up to,
Mm.
500 students in a room.
Oh,
You
wow.
try and grab a group of 500 13-year-olds to listen to you for an hour talking about mental health. It's not easy, but it actually really pleasantly surprises me because what we've kind of already spoken about earlier, I get to come in and show like a video of me surfing and then talk about, hey, I'm just like you guys. Like I've struggled with stuff. Like I think people just love hearing vulnerability. It's not like
Mm.
a talk about, hey, this gold medalist who won at the Olympics and now I've struggled. Like I try to make stuff really relatable. And that's what I've found with like a lot of students come up to me after workshops going like, oh, I haven't heard about mental health like that. It seems achievable now to actually do these little things to get good mental health rather than wait until I'm struggling and now know the places to call and this counselor to go and see. It's like
Mm.
the way that I describe it, and a lot of people do, don't get me wrong, definitely not just saying I've got a trademark on this idea of prevention rather than wait until we get to crisis. But I
Yeah.
just think with young people, it's hard to find that sweet spot. Uh, but yeah, I feel for them. Young people have got a very different world to live in. I mean, it's a little bit similar to what I had, but to people older than me, it's so different. So just trying to have empathy for young people when you might not understand what they're going through, instead of judging them and going, "Oh, you got it easy." Just trying to have a bit of empathy for young people is something that I've really learned. But also the same for people, older who are struggling with adapting to the fast pacing world that we're living in nowadays. So what I've learned through having such a dichotomy of different people that I speak to, whether it be through my podcast, through my community on Instagram and the 1% community, or the in-person workshops, I've just learned like we're all so different. and we're
Mm.
also the same at the same time. So we all feel the myriad of emotions and we all have
Yeah.
our ups and downs. But, to not judge people, I think is such a important first step and something that I've learned through speaking to so many people. So many people are struggling with so many different things and so
Yes.
many people are thriving as well. So how can we learn from those who are thriving and how can we best help those who are struggling?
And I think that's such a good point. When I think about the real math of business, everybody's definition of success and the math that works for every business is so different, right?
Mm,
But at the end of the day, a business is just made up of a bunch of people doing a bunch of things together,
hmm
right? For the purpose of money. Like when I hear you say we're all human, but everyone has such different experiences, but really we're all like, how do you? And I guess it probably comes to that empathy point. How do you practically, and maybe if you share a little bit, maybe through the use of the mining company or however, how do you create a platform for people to feel comfortable sharing their differences, their challenges, maybe getting a little bit vulnerable to kind of put on the table that idea that we are all human, but we're all having a different experience as a human. So our challenges are different. And then kind of get them to the point where you go, right, here is how we might tackle some of those things together. Maybe if you've got like a particular client or story that you can share with us to kind of bring that to life would be really helpful.
Yeah, I think it's I mean, sharing my personal story is always the first and foremost. Like, you have to be able to be a good keynote speaker. You got to tell
Mm,
stories and be able to get vulnerable. But I think I want to go back to what you kind of said. This idea of businesses about people doing things together to make money. I feel like we've gotten the world so backwards that, like, obviously money is what we all need to survive, but I really
mm.
think the sweet spot in business is how can you make impact and then get given money for it? And obviously there's not every
Yes.
business is going to have, a net positive impact in the world. There's
Mm,
companies doing things that maybe aren't doing that. But I think for me and what I try and, bring to the idea once I do these work with people is like I kind of said at the start, like, sure, this job is what you do, but it's not who you are. Like, we are so much
mm.
more than the, 8 hours we spend inside the walls at work. We're the relationship you have with your friends at work. So that's what I try and bring this idea of have a conversation with the person next to you about what you're grateful for. And I ask people to say a person, a place, and a food they're grateful for. I give them this exercise. They do that. And then every time I'll go to the mines, I'll go to a big tech company, I'll go to, an accounting firm I've spoken to pretty much every industry. And
Yeah.
every time it's the same because I get people to have a chat with one of their coworkers about what
Mm.
they're grateful for, and everybody learns something about one of their colleagues. And it's
Yeah.
like we work between these walls together, yet we don't really have relationships with the people who we
Mm.
work with that often. You might have one or two friends that you know a bit about, but we have these
Yeah.
opportunities to collaborate, to connect. And like at the end of the day, life's about that, not about working and making money. So if you can be doing that while working and making money,
That's
I feel like
right.
that's a real sweet spot in life. I mean,
Yeah.
the longest study done with Harvard, a longitudinal study that's gone for like over 80 years, the number one predictor for your quality of life was your quality of your relationships. It wasn't your
Yeah.
exercise, it wasn't the amount of food, the healthiness of your
Mhm.
food, it was the health of your relationships. So that's what I try and get through to people when I'm doing these workshops. Sure, I'm coming to your workplace, but life, I think, should be 70% life, 30% work. I feel like people have a far different
Yeah.
split than that. And I've very consciously built a life by design where I can, go surfing,
Yeah.
work from home, travel, and get do all the things that I want to do. And I know not everyone has that opportunity, but how can you find in your workday those moments that are more than work? How can you have that conversation at the lunch when you sit down with your colleague going like, "Oh, what's exciting coming up this weekend for you?" And try and get
Yeah.
outside of that. I think that's what's really important. That's what I try and bring into the workplace. There's incredible speakers that come in and talk about leadership and about productivity, and the great thing is my work actually adds to all of that stuff.
Yeah.
When you come into work with a smile on your face and you want to connect with your colleague, hey, you come up with a better project together. When you
Mhm.
come to work and your colleague's going through something and you sit there and have the ability to listen for 10 minutes, oh, then they're not sitting there heavy all day and not working because they're just in their head. You've given them a space. So
Absolutely.
these skills that might seem like soft skills end up actually bringing more productivity, less absenteeism, like so much to the workplace.
Yeah.
if we invest in it, and there's actually great studies that show, the more you invest in well-being, it actually comes back, like, I think it's 2 or 3 to 1 in investment dollars,
Yeah, right.
because your staff feel better, they wanna work, they're ready to, show up. So I, yeah, love getting to bring this extra world, and so often you see some businesses really care, some get me in as a bit of a box tick, of a bit of a, "Hey, we've gotta spend this
Yeah.
budget on something," but almost every single time the client books me and goes, "Wow, I didn't realize how much we needed that. Oh, I've heard the
Mm.
staff talking about that for the last 2 weeks since," and like you can just see the energy change. So yeah, what I've learned is so often people think in education and well-being is a bit of a box tick, but then they realize it's actually caring about your staff, and like that's the most important thing in everyone's business is your people.
Well, and I think you're so right because quite often when I'm in a workshop environment with a client, actually I share a little bit of a story because it happened, or let's say in August, September, that September, October. I walked into a workshop. It had been pushed back because something happened in my life that my mum died, and so they
Sorry to hear.
gratefully said, we'll push it back, all the rest of it. And they all knew that. Like, I'm very close with this particular client. So we kind of sat around, and I had heard anecdotally that in the period between when it was scheduled and when we actually had the session, which was about 6 to 8 week delay, right? And as you would know, like sometimes companies don't think that you've got any room to move with a workshop like that, right? Anyway, I had heard anecdotally from the CEO and the CFO that some other quite bad things that had happened to several of the execs around the table. So anyway, I got there, and I'm, pretty transparent with anyone, but I've been working with this client for a very long time. And so I said, thank you so much for your grace and blah, blah, blah. Um, and obviously I've gone through something quite challenging recently, but I understand, that life hasn't been that easy for many of us around the table. Anyway, so quite often what I do at the beginning of a workshop is I just kind of let the room breathe a little bit. So kind of let everyone say kind of how they're going, what's on their mind. Cooper, the stuff that came out from these execs, like I thought I had it pretty bad, but there was some big stuff. And so I thought, as what you do in far more depth, because I don't do mental health, as I'm not an expert in mental health, there was just kind of this release in the room that suddenly everyone was more present, more empathetic. They were able to engage better in the next 2 days. And part of my reflection as I left was, man, that was a relatively small group of people, 8 to 10 of us.
Mm.
Think about that much bad stuff with that group of people, multiplied that by, 10, 20, the size of organizations that we deal with, everyone's dealing with something. And it's not
Everyone.
always addressed. And you just think, kind of coming back to this idea of the math of business, yes, there's the very human side of things that we've got to take care of our people. But if you want to be ruthless, and you and I both know there are companies that do just want to tick the box and go, yes, we ran a mental health seminar for our people. Um, there is a real ROI on this stuff, because when people are in various different, experiences different challenges that influence their mental health in certain ways, they can't think clearly. They are not making the best decisions
Mhm.
possible, right?
Exactly.
And I can only imagine the sort of experiences that you must have and the stories that you uncover when you give people that safe space. The ROI, if you did want to get really ruthless about it, I imagine would be quite significant because everybody's carrying something.
Exactly, and that's a thing, like, absolutely, thank you so much as well for sharing yours and sharing that experience with your client. Like, I did a breathwork, facilitator course last year that was, like, a few hundred hours of training, then a 5-day retreat where 20 of us all had to do these breathwork trauma release things, and, like, I've had a few things gone in my life, but to be honest, quite trauma-free. Every single person bawled their eyes out, screamed in rage. Like, we all just store so much of this trauma in our body and don't
Yeah.
get a safe space to express it. And my sessions do not go anywhere near into any of that, to be honest. I really, because I'm not a mental health professional, I'm not, a
Mm,
psychologist, I really
mm.
don't give people any therapy at all, especially nothing one on one.
Yeah.
But I really come from the positive side. Like, let's talk about the gratitudes in our life. Let's talk about the positives,
Mm.
and that
Mm.
gives people a safe space to go, oh yeah, that is something good going on in my life. And some people haven't thought about something good in a long time. So yeah, it's a pretty special thing just to give people space and permission to self-reflect and to take a breath and to teach them the skills to do that. Like, all the exercises I do through my workshop are around like regulating your nervous system, how to breathe through your nose down to your belly so you can move out of that fight or flight into your rest and
Yeah.
digest. So, your body can get rid of so your immune function can work. All these
Yeah.
systems in our body work better when we're in our rest and digest, when our nervous system isn't jacked up. And a lot of us are sitting in that fight or flight all day, every day. So, yeah, a lot of the stuff that I teach is like, when you find yourself in that little moment, you feel your heart rate rise, you start
Yeah.
breathing fast. What can I do? Instead of sitting in this for hours, days, weeks, months, how
Mm.
do I bring myself back? And that's where I think, whether, as we were kind of alluding to before, you're just ticking the box and going, oh, we've done our mental health thing. Like, don't wait until someone's in crisis that you come and tick one box. Invest in it. Do something at the start of the year for your staff. Do something for the
Yeah.
second half of the year so that when that arises, they go, oh, I've got those 3 things in my toolbox that I can go back to. I remember what that guy talked about. And that's what we need to do. Upskill, be prepared for those challenges. So, when things get challenging, we're a little bit more equipped to deal with them.
Mm. Do you find I'm listening to you talk and all the tips and the techniques that you share with everyone, they're very accessible. But as in, I could be sitting here freaking out, and I'm not, by the way. But I could be catching myself in the moment and start breathing in a way that calms myself down and all the rest of it, right? Very doable. People need the information, but they all, and this is the question, is there a sense that they need permission to do it in the workplace?
Yeah, I
Like,
think
what's the
definitely.
blocker? Is it awareness? Is it permission? Is it
I
time?
think it's I think it's one, the lack of knowledge for, like, first and foremost, like, we have to have the knowledge. For me, I'm a very, like, skeptical person, so, like, I need to know the science. So that's where, like, the
Yeah.
work that I do is always based in science and
Yeah.
studies. So I
Yeah.
think that's first to, like, bump the skepticism. Two is to sorta, I mean, in the workplace, and all of the stuff that I do is really purposeful, like, people don't even know you're doing it. Mine's like a
Mhm.
breathing technique or an awareness technique where you focus, what can I see, hear, and feel? No one even knows you're doing these things.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
just for you to change your internal world. And
Yes.
these are things that I on purpose make like 1 or 2 minute exercises, because I know if I come in and go, here's your 20-minute routine when you first get to
Yes.
work, here's what you should do in your lunch break, no
Yeah.
one's gonna do it. And that's where, like, all of my work comes down to, like, how do I make it as simple as possible? How do I get the best expert knowledge and
Yeah.
dwindle it down to a 1 or 2 minute exercise, so when you are in that point that you need it, you can use it. And that's where, like, my whole concept of my book, The 1% Good Club,
Yeah.
is all about giving 1% of your day to your mental health. And that's where, my publishers loved it, and so many people who have read it have loved it because
Yeah.
it makes it simple. It goes, here's your baseline. At least
Um,
do 14 minutes, 1% of your day for your mental health. And then if you do more, amazing, but start with that baseline. And I think anyone listening can agree, oh, that sounds like a pretty good amount of time that I could give,
yeah.
1% of my day. And yeah, so coming back to in the workplace, I think giving people the knowledge, and then, yeah, as you said, the permission, so that, all right, if your staff need to go for a 5-minute break, which I'm sure already workplaces are happy to do, but it's just
Mm.
having those moments where it's like, hey, if you need to go for a walk in nature to, let your electromagnetic field balance out, go for a walk at lunch, give your staff an
Yeah.
extra 15 minutes at lunch so they can go and eat a healthy lunch rather than have to rush and quickly get something. Like,
Yeah.
these little things are investments of, like, your staff's well-being, which should matter more than a profit anyway. But then on secondary, it ends up being more profitable anyway because they come back to work ready to work and, had a bit more time to themselves. So, yeah, I think permission's a big one. The knowledge of it's another one. But then it just comes back down to that personal
Responsibility.
ability to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. I mean, you do need. I love that. I loved that responsibility was your number one, because I do believe that we need to take control of our lives, and we are responsible for, how we go about things. We can choose to be a victim, or we can choose to not be. Right. So I love that. I'm curious, and I love that you said that you're a skeptic. I think that's really important, because I imagine that you probably get a couple of eye rolls when people hear about what you do generally without knowing
Mhm.
and having the benefit of a conversation. How, if I were listening to this or watching this podcast now, how would I figure out if mental health was being discussed, treated as a box ticking exercise in my organization? Because what happens when people listening to this stuff and they kind of become the champion? I'm going to get the book, I'm going to do the things, but I'm not yet at a level where I can bring Cooper into my organization. Or we're already doing some stuff around mental health, but I think it's box ticking. What does
Mm.
box ticking look like? How would I be able to suss that out?
I mean, it's a really difficult one because, to be honest, what I do, I'm generally a box tick, but then the box, you can see the
Ah,
difference. There's because I have like I have two different 90-minute workshops, or I can combine it into a half day, and that's kind of all you can really do with me because I kind of want to spread really wide with a really good message rather than
yeah.
do, you know, work with organizations full time for a year. For one, I don't have that depth of knowledge to really take people through that. I don't have that
Yes.
professional one-on-one thing, but I do have the knowledge to hopefully spark the curiosity for then the organization to go and engage other people that are friends of mine in the industry who do go a little bit deeper, who are
Mm.
psychologists and whatnot. But I
Yeah.
think what's important is, sure, I might be not the box tick because I know businesses, for one, don't have unlimited budget for this stuff. Two, don't have the time. Everyone's so busy to get
Mm.
through what they need to get done. So, first and foremost, if you get me in, even if it does feel like a box tick, who cares? You're still going to get the benefit if you're the
Yes.
staff. But very often, you'll see the client will be a staff member who goes, "Hey, this guy's great. I listened to his podcast. I read his book. I
Yeah.
blah blah. I heard him on this. This sounds exactly what we need." You go to your thingo, and generally the person who will book me will be like, "Oh, we'll tick the box because one of our staff wants it."
Yes.
But about 98% of the time, based on my data, I'm recommended to a friend from my clients.
Yeah.
So almost every time, the client who books me, who maybe
Mm.
wasn't the one who cared too much about it, will come up to me after and go, "Oh my God, we didn't realize how much we actually needed that in the organization."
Yes.
Then it sparks the curiosity to maybe do more or to get me back in for the second workshop or to buy a
Yes.
copy of my book. So I think even if you feel like your work is only box ticking, it's better than the workplace that's doing nothing. But there's the
Yes.
opportunity for them to actually see the impact that can be done by working with organizations like mine, like other people. If you are like, "Oh, we want something bigger, more intense," I've got some
Yeah.
incredible people who do that. I'm sure you do as well. But yeah, I think if you feel like your workplace is just sort of doing the box ticking, great, it's better than some, but then you
Yeah.
can lean into after they do the box tick, "Wow, that really helped me." Be verbal with your uppers at work
Mm.
who have booked it, going like, "Hey, I think this will be really helpful. I know Cooper's worked with Apple, with Telstra, with Amazon, with Red Bull, like, it's
Yeah.
helping their stuff, with miners, with tech
Yeah.
comp," like, it everyone has mental health, so
Yeah.
everybody can benefit from, my work, and I don't want this to be like a promotion of just my work, like, anyone in this space of well-being, do your research, find the one who you think is gonna be a good fit. Like, if you've got
Yeah.
a lot of young staff, maybe someone like me is great because it's someone relatable. As I said, though, I do a lot of stuff in other industries that I surprise myself with. Um, but yeah, I think just going to your workplace, saying like, "Hey, I'm really interested in doing some more well-being work with the staff this year. I think it's gonna have a lot of benefits." No, come from the productivity angle. Like, there's so many
Yeah.
angles you can play. Like, "Hey, I've heard that this stuff's, like, really good. Here's" you can type it on ChatGPT, it'll tell you. I think, yeah, I don't wanna butcher the numbers, but I think it's about $2 or $3 to every dollar you spend, it comes back. Like, this is the way I look at it. I'll just give you one last thing. Say you have get me to come in, you've got 100 staff. Everyone makes $300 a day. Let's call it minimum, or that's what you call it, $300 per person. If you get my workshop in, it costs you a couple grand. If like half of your staff take one less day off across the year, that's
Mm.
like, you know, what, 50 people at $300 a day. That's, my math brain isn't working. But anyway, basically, the investment, I believe, is truly worth it because, for one, it shows your staff that you care about them. It's great for
Mm.
also
Mm.
when you're employing new staff saying, "Oh, yeah, we also do this mental health stuff." Great. There's another upsell for when you're trying to
Yeah.
hire new staff. Lowers absenteeism, lowers turnover, like all of the data's there. It's, yeah, just becoming aware that this stuff is super important for productivity, but most important to take care of your staff.
Yeah. And look, do you know what I love about what you've just shared? And thank you. There was so much in all of that. Like, I can tell you really walk the talk. So, for starters, I want to just come to this point where you said before we should be having impact first and then getting paid for that. I think you've just demonstrated that, right? Like, I want to I want to make an impact, and yes, I might get paid for it, and that's great, but it's impact first. Um, but you also, when you are answering the box ticking, you know, if your company's doing it and you think I'm looking at, if you're wondering what I'm looking at your values that I've written down. If your company's doing it as a box ticking, just be grateful. Value number two,
Mm,
because some people don't use it, take responsibility and use it. Value number one. And maybe have a think about, and if you do want something deeper, then that's beyond my scope, beyond the Good Human Factory scope. I've got people that do that as well. So give the work to them. That's all right. Connection. Like, I just love in everything that you just said. It was like I was ticking your values off. And I think I'm guessing this is why they're your values to start with. But actually, what you've said, these are really practical values that if everyone embodies, everyone will benefit.
exactly.
And I just think that, to be perfectly honest, I also I love most of all that you said if it's a box ticking exercise, I don't care. It's better than nothing. And
Mm,
you should just take it. And I think, I actually am holding the mirror up a little bit for myself because I know not a mental health training, but I've had when I was back in my corporate days and I would get given stuff and I'd eye roll. What was I thinking? Like, that's the young,
mm.
arrogant self, which fortunately doesn't exist anymore. But also, I think the younger generations don't necessarily have that sort of eye roll mentality anymore, which I think why it's so wonderful that you're kind of stepping into this space and helping people through this.
Yeah, and it's like even if someone's booking me to tick a box, I'm not there to tick a box. I'm there to make impact. I'm there to help people. I'm there to talk to the people who are willing to listen. And I think every single
Mm,
person listening to this podcast, every single person in every room I've ever spoken to has been affected by mental illness, whether it's personally, a family member, a friend, somebody they've seen. Like, it is everywhere. I've broken down doors and found friends with, trying to take their life and had to call ambulances. Like, this stuff is everywhere. And I feel for so many people who are dealing with personally, first and foremost, mental illnesses,
mm,
people who are slowly falling down the slope or getting closer to it. Like, that's why I'm so passionate about this work. Because if we can encourage, motivate, inspire people to take those steps themselves, because that's what I think's
mm,
really needed. We can, fund and fund and fund the mental health space, but we really need to change minds and we need to change hearts and get people to actually start doing the things for themselves.
yeah,
And yeah, I'm very fortunate that I've found, a bit of a knack to be able to communicate my story in a way that hopefully inspires people to do that. Because, of what I can see is if I go the other direction of not living by these values, of not, doing these habits, I know the other side of that is, the path of my uncle and, not being here for too much longer. So it's
mm.
about the work every single day, but how do you have the knowledge, but then also the wisdom to actually practice it?
Wow. And I have to say, I mean, for you to have this level of wisdom and knowledge at quite a young age, I'll just call it out. You were a bit younger than me.
Mhm.
I'm so impressed, Cooper. I seriously am. And I'm very grateful that you're out there doing this work because it does sound like you are very effective in bridging across generations, which is incredibly difficult when you're talking about a topic like this. So, well done for all of the work that you're doing and all of your successes that you're clearly having.
No, thank you. It's been yeah, it's been a crazy couple of years transitioning out of that, and then I actually also do a really cool partnership with Surfers for Climate and have a program called Blue Minds where we do school workshops and talk to kids about taking care of the ocean and taking care of their mental health, because there's a lot of research showing that a lot of young people have eco anxiety, or when they think about the future of the planet they have big concerns. So we actually, my partner and I, Cal, with Surfers for Climate, just got a $700,000 philanthropy grant for the next 2 years to deliver workshops to, yeah, over 20,000 in person this year. And yeah,
Wow.
we went to the United Nations climate change conference in Brazil in November last year to speak on behalf of Australian youth and learn from youth leaders about what they're doing to take care of the planet. So yeah, lots of different crazy different things I'm doing
Wow.
at the moment as well that we didn't even get to touch on today. But no, I really appreciate getting to, yeah, hopefully give people some new ways to look at mental health heading into 2026, some ways to look at their business and how they're best, yeah, connecting with their employees and their staff to, give us a wholesome place to work, but also a place to thrive. So, yeah, lots of other stuff that we didn't get into
That's
today. But yeah, if you
that's
find me
okay.
on social
We'll
media,
come back for
learn
part
all about it.
2. We'll come back for
Yeah.
part 2. If I'm listening to this, what is like the final gold nugget that you might be able to give me if I'm listening and going, "Oh, this is so good." What's the one practical tip that you know is just everybody should be doing?
I'll give you two. First one, start with 1% of your day. If you're listening right now and you're like, I need help with that, I have an Instagram community called the 1% Good Club as well. So if you send at the Good Human Factory a
Yep,
DM on Instagram saying, I want to join the club, you
yep.
get added into the 1% community, which basically every single morning for the past 1600 days, 4 years, I send a guided 10-minute meditation link. So there's your 10 minutes.
Oh,
And then every night there's 4,000 people who write 3 things they're grateful for, and that's your 4 minutes of gratitude. So there's 1% of your day
14
for your mental
minutes.
health.
Yeah,
So first and foremost, if you're like, oh, I'm on Instagram and I want to be part of a positive community and want that link sent to me every morning and to write my gratitudes, go
yep.
send us that DM. So that's one practical thing to do.
And that's
But the
at
other one,
the Good Human Club
the Good Human Factory. On
Factory. Okay.
Instagram, you'll see the
Yep,
yellow smiley with the good. That's our
yep.
Instagram. Just send us a message saying, I want to join the club, and you'll get
I
added
wanna
into the
join the club.
1% club.
Cool.
And then that was where the book extension came from. So go grab a copy of the
Yeah,
book, The 1%
yeah.
Good Club, if you want to go a bit deeper on that knowledge and community. But then the second one, I'll just finish with this quote because it's a good one to remind yourself of to start the year. And it's this: the act of confidence comes before the feeling of confidence. So many of us are waiting to feel like, oh, now I can
Mm,
do the 1%. I feel confident to do it. The feeling doesn't come until you start doing the action. So once you can start to rewire your brain, like I just need to do the thing that feels hard and then it feels easy rather than
yeah.
I'll do it enough and then it'll feel easy. It's like, no, you have to learn that the act of confidence is going to come before the feeling. And I use that every time I get on stage speaking in front of thousands of people at a conference.
Yeah.
Wait, I'm gonna just act like I know what I'm doing, and then the feeling comes rather than, "Oh my god, am I prepared enough to feel confident?" Like, obviously
Yes.
prepare, but yeah, the act of confidence comes before the feeling.
Oh,
It's a great little one to
I
remember.
love that. That might go on my wall, Cooper. I'll take a photo of it and send it to you.
Amazing.
That's amazing. So at the Good Factory on Insta, I want to join the club, get a copy of the book, and the act of confidence comes before the feeling of
Yes.
confidence. I
Yeah.
love that. Cooper, you've given us a couple of ways to contact and learn more about you. If I want to directly contact you as a result of listening to you here, how's the best way to do that?
If you want to find anything about the workshops that I've been, talking quite a lot about
Yep.
throughout this, just at thegoodhumanfactory.com. You
Yep.
can find all about the workshops that I deliver. You can also find the merch that we do. If you want to find my podcast, it's just Good Humans with Cooper Chapman.
Love it.
Yeah, a bunch of really cool episodes on there, speaking to, every sort of different kind of person, from monks to hypnotists to health experts and everything else in between. You can find that. And then the best place to probably find me is just Instagram at Cooper Chapman. Send me a DM if you found this episode interesting or you have any questions about anything at all. I always do my best to get back to everyone as soon as possible. But yeah, thanks so much for the opportunity to kick off 2026 with a great conversation. I really enjoyed it, Alena.
Oh, it's amazing, Cooper. Thank you for being so generous and vulnerable with your stories. And yeah, I'm just very thankful that you're out there taking all of your learnings, all of your experiences on the road like this. Such great work. Thank you so much for kicking off 2026 with us.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
And what a great chat with Cooper. This leads us right into our listener question. And if you want to submit a listener question, you can now email us at realmathofbusiness@gmail.com, or you can leave a comment on YouTube or Spotify and we'll hopefully get it into a future episode. This week's listener question for this episode is from Michael. Hey, Michael. Dear Eleanor, I was recently listening to your show with Jim Ferry, and I wanted to know what was the real math of business like when you worked in the US. How much has changed in your thinking since working there? Regards, Michael. That's a really interesting question. I quite often have the US, my time working in the US, as a bit of a reference point. I think it was quite pivotal in shaping how I think. Uh, I was a senior manager at KPMG over there, which meant that I got a really good look at many elements or aspects of the real math of business. But I didn't own a P&L like the partners did. So in terms of really immersing myself, like I kind of talk about my career journeys, I went from bean counter to business partner to business owner. And I really feel that now that I have kind of walked that or, moved through that spectrum, I now have a much greater sense of what the real math of business is like that maybe you can't necessarily do if you've, just been a bean counter or business partner. It's really, really when you've got 100% skin in the game and that business is yours, I think that's when you get that breadth of knowledge or insight or experience. However, what I will say from my experience in the US is the people that I worked with, the clients that I worked with, my colleagues, my partners that I worked with, their perception of the economics around business was definitely more pointed and more ruthless than I was used to back in Australia. They were more willing to openly talk about money, to talk about profit, to talk about the need and the love of making money, right? They're just more overt about things, which I quite appreciate, to be perfectly honest with you. So there was that element. There was definitely my kids joke about capitalism. It definitely felt like I was living in a capitalist economy. If I wanted something, as long as I could pay for it, I was going to get it, right? For all the good and bad that comes with that. One of the questions I quite often get about my time in the US is about my working hours. So there was this perception in the US that, because everyone's so focused on money and productivity and all of those great things, that you worked 1,000,000 hours a day. And I think I've shared this story previously in the podcast. I probably did work longer hours, but what I was able to do is work them in my way at my location. So I actually felt like I had more autonomy in that. So when we think about the real math of business with that interdependency between math or money and people, yeah, I think that the money was definitely front of mind, more overtly front of mind in the US. But what I will say is that I feel like as a human, I had more control over how I was going to work and therefore contribute to that money making. And then I think in terms of your question, Michael, around how much has that changed in your thinking since working there, coming back and working back in Australia, what I came back to was very much a bum on the seat, spoken to, not, be spoken to, but not heard. We're going to kind of dance around things a little bit more. And I kind of thought neither is right or wrong. But what I will say about my experience in the US is that it opened up my eyes to the different possibilities of doing things. And so I think ultimately, in terms of the answer to your question, Michael, I think it has changed my thinking, but I think what it's done is it's broadened my horizons, it's opened up my eyes to the fact that the real math of business looks different. And because the economy is enormous, the number of companies that are sprouting up out of nowhere, it's just, I love it. I love that there are just small businesses constantly popping up. And, as they say, there are so many small businesses that fail before you even hear about them. But I just think that the fact that the market is such that you can start a business, I think that's exciting because I do think small and medium businesses will change the game for the future. With that in mind, I just think that anything's possible when it comes to the real math of business. There is no one right way to do things. I think the opportunity that we have is to figure out what we want to do, what is the impact it's going to make, and how is the best way for us that is going to get us there. As opposed to, this is how you get success. So I think that's kind of a roundabout way of answering your question. The US, not having had that experience in the US, I probably wouldn't be here, to be perfectly honest with you, in this role. Because I think it significantly shifted my thinking in terms of what's possible for me and what's possible in business just generally. And that is sort of what I love providing the clients that I work with their businesses, is how to figure out what's the thing that makes them unique in the market and how do we help them scale so we can deliver the type of success that they want that may be different to the type of success that other businesses want. So I hope that helps, Michael. Thank you for listening to The Real Math of Business with Alena Bennett. If you liked this episode, remember to subscribe for more content and stay on top of the real math of business. I've been Alena Bennett.